The numeric system represented by Roman numerals originated in ancient Rome and remained the usual way of writing numbers throughout Europe well into the late Middle Ages. Numbers in this system are represented by combinations of letters from the Latin alphabet. Roman numerals, as used today, are based on 7 symbols. The use of Roman numerals continued long after the decline of the Roman Empire. For the 14th century on, Roman numerals began to be replaced in most contexts by the more convenient Hindu-Arabic numerals. However, this process was gradual, and the use of Roman numerals persists in some minor applications to this day. Roman numeric system. The numbers chapter 1 to 10 are usually expressed in Roman numerals as follows: I, 2, 3, IV, V, Vi, 7, 8, IX, X. Numbers are formed by combining symbols and adding the values, so 2 is 2 and 13 is 13. Because each numeral has a fixed value rather than representing multiples of 10, 100 and so on according to position, there is no need for placekeeping zeros, as in numbers like 207 or 1066. Those numbers are written as CCVI and MLXVI. Symbols are placed from left to right in order of value, starting with the largest. However, in a few specific cases, to avoid 4 characters being repeated in succession, subtractive notation is often used as follows: I placed before V or X indicates 1 less, so 4 is IV and 9 is IX. X placed before L or C indicates 10 less, so 40 is XL and 90 is XC. C placed before D or M indicates 100 less, so 400 is CD and 900 is CM. For example, MCMIV is 1904, 1904. Some examples of the modern use of Roman numerals include 1954 as MCMLIV, as in the trailer for the movie The Last Time I Saw Paris. 1990 as MCMXC, used as the title of musical project Enigma's debut album MCMXCA. Named after the year of its release. 2014 as MMXIV, the year of the Games of the 22nd Olympic Winter Games. Alternative forms. The standard forms described above reflect typical modern usage rather than a universally accepted convention. Usage in ancient Rome varied greatly and remained inconsistent in medieval and modern times. Roman inscriptions, especially in official contexts, seem to show a preference for additive forms such as for and VIII instead of subtractive forms such as IV and IX. Both methods appear in documents from the Roman era, even within the same document. Double subtractives also occur, such as XIIX or even IIXX instead of 18. Sometimes V and L are not used, with instances such as III and XXXXXX rather than VIA Lux. Such variation and inconsistency continued through the medieval period and into modern times, even becoming conventional. Clock faces that use Roman numerals normally show 4 for 4 o'clock but IX for 9 o'clock, a practice that goes back to very early clocks such as the Wells Cathedral clock. However, this is far from universal. For example, the clock on the Palace of Westminster in London uses IV. Similarly, at the beginning of the 20th century, different representations of 900 appeared in several inscribed dates. For instance, 1910 is shown on Admiralty Arch, London, as MDCCCCX rather than MCMX, while on the north entrance to the St. Louis Art Museum, 1903 is inscribed as MDCDIII rather than MCMIII. History. Pre-Roman times in ancient Rome. Although Roman numerals came to be written with letters of the Roman alphabet, they were originally independent symbols. The Etruscans, for example, used and for 1 V, X, L, C, and M, of which only I and X happened to be letters in their alphabet. Hypotheses about the origin of Roman numerals tally marks. One hypothesis is that the Etrusco-Roman numerals actually derived from notches on tally sticks, which continued to be used by Italian and Dalmatian shepherds into the 19th century. Thus, I descends not from the letter I but from a notch scored across the stick. Every fifth notch was double cut I, E, etc., and every 10th was cross-cut for lambda I lambda I. Much like European tally marks today. This produced a positional system. A counting stick was 8 tallies for lambda 3, or the 8th of a longer series of tallies. Either way, it could be abbreviated lambda 3, as the existence of a lambda implies 4 prior notches. By extension, 18 was the 8th tally, after the first 10, which could be abbreviated X, and so was X lambda 3. Likewise, number 4 on the stick was the I notch that could be felt just before the cut of the lambda, so it could be written as either 4 or I lambda. Thus the system was neither additive nor subtractive in its conception, but ordinal. When the tallies were transferred to writing, the marks were easily identified with the existing Roman letters I, V and X. The 10th V or X along the stick received an extra stroke. Thus 50 was written variously as N, K, Psi, etc., but perhaps most often as a chicken track shaped like a superimposed V and I. This had flattened by the time of Augustus, and soon thereafter became identified with the graphically similar letter L. Likewise, 100 was variously H, or as any of the symbols for 50 above plus an extra stroke. The form came to predominate. It was written variously as NGT, I and LT, or IC, was then abbreviated to a C, with C variant finally winning out because, as a letter, it stood for centum, Latin for 100. The 100th V or X was marked with a box or circle. Thus 500 was like a superimposed on A or becoming D by the time of Augustus, under the graphic influence of the letter D. It was later identified as the letter D, and alternative symbol for 1000 was, and half of 1000 or 500 is the right half of the symbol I, and this may have been converted into D. This at least was the etymology given to it later on. Meanwhile, 1000 was a circled boxed X, and by Augustinian times was partially identified with the Greek letter phi. Over time, the symbol changed to psi and the latter symbol further evolved into infinity, then, and eventually changed to M under the influence of the Latin word mil, thousand. Hand signals. Alfred Hooper has an alternative hypothesis for the origin of the Roman numeral system for small numbers. Hooper contends that the digits are related to hand gestures for counting. For example, the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 correspond to the number of fingers held up for another to see. V then represents that hand upright with fingers together and thumb apart. Numbers chapters 6 to 10 are represented with two hands as follows: 6 equals, 7 equals, 8 equals, 9 equals, 10 equals, and X results from either crossing of the thumbs, or holding both hands up in a cross. Another possibility is that each I represents a finger and V represents the thumb of one hand. This way the numbers between 1 to 10 can be counted on one hand using the order I equals P, 2 equals PR, 3 equals PRM, IV equals IT, V equals T, Y equals TP, 7 equals TPR, 8 equals TPRM, IX equals IN, X equals N. This pattern can also be continued using the other hand with the fingers representing X and the thumb L. Intermediate symbols deriving from few original symbols. A third hypothesis about the origins states that the basic ciphers were IX, C and Phi, and that the intermediary ones were derived from taking half of those. Middle Ages and Renaissance. Minuscule letters were developed in the Middle Ages, well after the demise of the Western Roman Empire, and since that time lowercase versions of Roman numbers have also been commonly used, I, E, E, IV, and so on. Since the Middle Ages, AJ has sometimes been substituted for the final I of a lowercase Roman numeral, such as IIJ for 3 or VIJ for 7. This J can be considered a swash variant of I. The use of a final J is still used in medical prescriptions to prevent tampering with a misinterpretation of a number after it is written. Numerals in documents and inscriptions from the Middle Ages sometimes include additional symbols, which today are called medieval Roman numerals. Some simply substitute another letter for the standard one, while others serve as abbreviations for compound numerals. Although they are still listed today in some dictionaries, they are long out of use. Chronograms, messages with dates encoded into them, were popular during the Renaissance era. The chronogram would be a phrase containing the letters I, V, X, L, C, D, and M. By putting these letters together, the reader would obtain a number, usually indicating a particular year. Modern use. By the 11th century, Hindu-Arabic numerals had been introduced into Europe from Al-Andalus, by way of Arab traders and arithmetic treatises. Roman numerals, however, proved very persistent, remaining in common use in the West well into the 14th and 15th centuries, even in accounting and other business records. Replacement by the more convenient Arabic equivalents was quite gradual, and Roman numerals are still used today in certain contexts. A few examples of the current use are names of monarchs and popes, e.g. Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom, Pope Benedict XVI. These are referred to as regnal numbers, e.g. 2 is pronounced the second. This tradition began in Europe sporadically in the Middle Ages, gaining widespread use in England only during the reign of Henry VIII. Previously, the monarch was not known by numeral but by an epithet such as Edward the Confessor. Some monarchs seem to have preferred the use of 4 instead of IV on their coinage. Generational suffixes, particularly in the US, for people sharing the same name across generations. For example, William Howard Taft IV. In the French Republican calendar, initiated during the French Revolution, years were numbered by Roman numerals, from the year I when this calendar was introduced to the year 14 when it was abandoned. The year of production of films, television shows and other works of art within the work itself. It has been suggested by BBC News, perhaps facetiously, that this was originally done in an attempt to disguise the age of films or television programs. Outside reference to the work will use regular Hindu-Arabic numerals. Our marks on timepieces. In this context, 4 is usually written for the year of construction on building faces and cornerstones. Page numbering of prefaces and introductions of books, and sometimes of annexes to book volume and chapter numbers, as well as the several acts within a play. Sequels of some movies, video games, and other works. Outlines that use numbers to show hierarchical relationships. occurrences of a recurring grand event, for instance, the Summer and Winter Olympic Games, the Super Bowl, the annual championship game of the National Football League, WrestleMania, the annual professional wrestling event for the WWE. This usage has also been inconsistent. Specific disciplines in astronomy. The natural satellites or moons of the planets are traditionally designated by capital Roman numerals appended to the planet's name. For example, Titan's designation is Saturn V. In chemistry, Roman numerals are often used to denote the groups of the periodic table. They are also used in the IUPAC nomenclature of inorganic chemistry, for the oxidation number of cations which can take on several different positive charges. They are also used for naming phases of polymorphic crystals, such as ice. In computing, Roman numerals may be used in identifiers which are limited to alphabetic characters by syntactic constraints of the programming language. In LaTeX, for instance, label itemy refers to the label of an item in the third level E of a nested list environment. In military unit designation, Roman numerals are often used to distinguish between units at different levels. This reduces possible confusion, especially when viewing operational or strategic level maps. In particular, Army Corps are often numbered using Roman numerals, with Hindu-Arabic numerals being used for divisions and armies. In music, Roman numerals are used in several contexts. Movements are often numbered using Roman numerals. In music theory, the diatonic functions are identified using Roman numerals. Individual strings of stringed instruments, such as the violin, are often denoted by Roman numerals, with higher numbers denoting lower strings. In pharmacy, Roman numerals are used in some contexts, including S to denote 1/2 and N to mean nothing. In photography, Roman numerals are used to denote varying levels of brightness when using the zone system. In seismology, Roman numerals are used to designate degrees of the Mercalli intensity scale of earthquakes. In tarot, Roman numerals are used to denote the cards of the major arcana. In theology and biblical scholarship, the Septuagint is often referred to as LXX, as this translation of the Old Testament into Greek is named for the legendary number of its translators. In entomology, the broods of the 13 and 17-year periodical cicadas are identified by Roman numerals. Modern non-English use. Capital or small capital Roman numerals are widely used in Romance languages to denote centuries, e.g., the French XVIe sicle and the Spanish siglo XVIII mean 18th century. Slavic languages in and adjacent to Russia similarly favor Roman numerals. On the other hand, in Slavic languages in Central Europe, like most Germanic languages, one writes 18 before the local word for century. In many European countries, mixed Roman and Hindu-Arabic numerals are used to record dates. The month is written in Roman numerals, while the day is in Hindu-Arabic numerals. 14 by 1789 is the 14th of June 1789. In parts of Europe it is conventional to employ Roman numerals to represent the days of the week in hours of operation signs, displayed in windows or on doors of businesses, and also sometimes in railway and bus timetables. Monday, taken as the first day of the week, is represented by I. Sunday is represented by 7. The hours of operation signs are tables composed of two columns, where the left column is the day of the week in Roman numerals and the right column is a range of hours of operation from starting time to closing time. In the sample chart, the business opens from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays, and to 1 p.m. on Saturdays, and is closed on Sundays. In several European countries, Roman numerals are used for floor numbering. For instance, apartments in central Amsterdam are indicated as 138E, with both a Hindu-Arabic numeral and a Roman numeral. The apartment on the ground floor is indicated as 138 UIs. In Italy, where roads outside built-up areas have kilometer signs, major roads and motorways also mark chapter 100-meter subdivisionals, using Roman numerals from I to IX for the smaller intervals. The sign IX17 thus marks kilometer 17.9. A notable exception to the use of Roman numerals in Europe is in Greece, where Greek numerals are generally used in contexts where Roman numerals would be used elsewhere. Special values. 0. The number 0 does not have its own Roman numeral, but the word nulla was used by medieval scholars in lieu of 0. Dionysius Exiguus was known to use nulla alongside Roman numerals in 525. About 725 BC, one of his colleagues used the letter N, the initial of nulla, in a table of Pacts, all written in Roman numerals. Fractions. Though the Romans used a decimal system for whole numbers, reflecting how they counted in Latin, they used a duodecimal system for fractions, because the divisibility of 12 makes it easier to handle the common fractions of 1/3 and 1/4 than does a system based on 10. On coins, many of which had values that were duodecimal fractions of the unit as, they used a tally-like notational system based on twelfths and halves. A dot indicated an uncia twelfth, the source of the English words inch and ounce. Dots were repeated for fractions up to 5/12. 6/12 was abbreviated as the letter S for semis. Uncia dots were added to S for fractions from 7 to 11/12, just as tallies were added to V for whole numbers from 6 to 9. Each fraction from 1/12 to 12/12 had a name in Roman times. These corresponded to the names of the related coins. The arrangement of the dots was variable and not necessarily linear. 5 dots arranged like are known as a quincunx, from the name of the Roman fraction coin. The Latin words sextans and quadrans of the source of the English words sextant and quadrant. Other Roman fractional notations included the following: 1/8 sescuncia. Sescuncia represented by a sequence of the symbols for the semuncia and the uncia. 1/24 semuncia. Semuncia represented by several variant glyphs deriving from the shape of the Greek letter sigma. One variant resembling the pound sign without the horizontal line and another resembling the Cyrillic letter. 1/36 bini sextulale. Binum sextularum duale represented by a sequence of two reversed s's. 1/48 Sicilicus. Sicilici represented by a reversed c. 1/72 sextulale represented by a reversed s. 1/144 equals 12 minus 2 dimidia sextulale represented by a reversed s crossed by a horizontal line. 1/288 scrupuli represented by the symbol 1/1728 equals 12 minus 3 silique represented by a symbol resembling closing guillemets. Large numbers. A number of systems were developed for the expression of larger numbers that cannot be conveniently expressed using the normal 7-letter symbols of conventional Roman numerals. Apostrophis. One of these was the apostrophis, in which 500 was written as, while 1000 was written as C instead of M. This is a system of encasing numbers to denote thousands, and has its origins in Etruscan numeral usage. The D and M used to represent 500 and 1000 in conventional Roman numerals were probably derived from and C, respectively. In this system, an extra denoted 500, 5000 and 50,000. For example, sometimes C was reduced to for 1000. John Wallis is often credited for introducing the symbol for infinity, and one conjecture is that he based it on this usage, since 1000 was hyperbolically used to represent very large numbers. Similarly, for 5000 was reduced to cc, for 10,000 to, for 50,000 to, and ccc, for 100,000 to. Vinculum. Another system is the vinculum, where a conventional Roman numeral is multiplied by 1000 by adding an overline. For instance, I for 1000, 25 for 25,000. Adding further vertical lines before and after the numeral might also be used to raise the multiplier to 100,000, or a million. Thus, 8 for 800,000, XX for 2 million. This needs to be distinguished from the custom of adding both underline and overline to a Roman numeral, simply to make it clear that it is a number, e.g. MCMLXVII. Certain typefaces, for example Times New Roman, are designed with serifs that simulate the appearance of the under-over bar, e.g. MCMLXVII.